Hello, this is Bipin Shah again, and welcome to the webinar. As you know, the topic of the webinar today is how to achieve collaborative development with tools integrations. Myself and our CTO, Basu, will be doing the webinar. I'll go through a brief slide presentation of PowerPoint slides that's going to take some in the neighborhood of 15 minutes or so. And then Sky will follow that up with a live demo of the integrations that we have talked about in the announcement. And then we will follow that up with question and answer, so we have a good interactive session. So let us begin. The topics that we'll cover today are what are some of the drivers for collaborative development? What are some of the things that make us think about collaborative development these days? Why collaboration is missing in most of the situations in development as far as the state of art is concerned today? What are some of the challenges of achieving these integrations? How the Kovair Omnibus differentiates Kovair from some of the other technologies. Follow that up with a demo, and then we'll also talk about a portfolio of adapters that we have for a lot of the industry tools in the development area and some of them in the IT management area. So, the goal of any development or any product creation while doing the development is, of course, to achieve very high productivity, good quality or excellent quality, and timely delivery. And what is complicating things in the more recent times is that development is not occurring only at one place. It's occurring at multiple locations. If you're doing it globally, it could be happening at multiple locations, even in large organizations, within the same country. Same thing is true for not only large companies, even in the government agencies that are spread all over. Things are happening at many, many different locations. And so how do you tie a lot of these activities together is a challenge, and that drives the need for collaborative development. On top of all this, you have multi-vendor tools that are disconnected from each other. It is essential to get best-of-breed tools, and they typically don't come from the same vendor. And so how do you connect these to really have a good collaborative environment? And that is going to be a major topic of our focus today. And the reason, again, the major reason that drives this integration of different tools is that you want to have a common data repository. If you have integration between tools, but you still do not achieve common data repository for your entire development, then that integration is not really going to achieve collaboration. And this is something that you, as users of various tools, need to think when you're approaching integration that, yes, point-to-point tools will allow one tool to talk to the other, but you may still not have a common data repository. And this may be true even from a single vendor sometimes when they have purchased different tools from different companies through acquisition, and then their tools from the same company are really not talking to each other. And without a good single data repository and a collaborative environment, to bring in a good process, implement that process, and enforce it is not very practical. So these are some of the things that one needs to consider in achieving collaborative development. Now, typically, if you're talking about application lifecycle management, and you have all the different aspects of ALM, such as requirements, test, development package, project portfolio management, change and issues management, etc. And if you have tools from different vendors, the red lines here indicate that they're all in different silos, meaning they are doing their own thing without any common repository, as I had described earlier. So they could be in functional silos, could be in technical silos, or geographic silos, depending on where they're located. So a product management activity could be occurring in Boston using a given requirements management tool, and the test could be happening in Bangalore. And if these two tools are not connected together, the only way to collaborate is through emails and phone calls and meetings, etc. So there is no true collaborative development achieved, and that's what people, by the way, talk about, all the burdens of multiple locations creating a lot of the communication nightmare and different hours of working and so on. Go ahead. There's no relationship between these artifacts, again, because I said they're not in the same database. There is no aggregation, therefore, of this information from all these different tools for any good management reporting. And simplistically, there is no collaboration. Everybody's working in isolation in their own little domain and doing whatever they're supposed to be doing without really achieving a common, let's say, mode of communication. Now, so the challenge is, as we said, that you have all these different repositories and platforms. You may have multiple locations. And many, many times, data normalizations, including nomenclature differences, unless you do the proper transformations between tools, you may not be able to achieve a common data. Then groups, different groups or different locations may use slightly different business rules, and that makes things more complex. And then sometimes you may have two different groups using the same requirements management activity using different tools. And so, again, that makes things, so these are a lot of the challenges of achieving integrations. And what we're going to show here is that you have, let's say you have these various tools that are shown here in blue cylinders here, Quality Center from HP, let's say, Perforce for source code management, a Requisite Pro for requirements management, and this, the last cylinder here, legacy database. It is not at all uncommon for many, many companies to have a lot of legacy database. Not only that, they may also have homegrown tools that may exist, let's say, under this category. And then let's say you bring in Kovair with a single repository where you say, okay, you're going to use Kovair in some groups for requirements management, for development package management, for issues management, etc. Even though Kovair has a single repository, how do you tie everything together to have a totally common repository? And what Kovair allows you to do is to create what we call proxy entities within the Kovair data repository. And these proxy entities are created through our application entities in Kovair, which can be configured to replicate the tools that you have outside of Kovair. And once you create these proxy entities, then our Omnibus integration bus, which is a bus technology with, which is SOA based, and so the standards are very universal. And with that Omnibus, you can create thin adapters that connect each one of these functional tools to the Kovair repository. and you are now achieving a common repository, whether through a federated or a synchronized data mode, where in the federated, you don't bring all of the data, you only bring the necessary information from Perforce, let's say, to the Kovair platform. And in certain cases, when you want things synchronized, for example, from Requisite Pro into Kovair, you can bring all of the data from one tool to the Kovair Common Repository. Having achieved this, you now have total collaboration, total traceability. You can get very good consolidated management reports, and you can implement a synchronized process. And by the way, again, this can be geographically in any number of locations that you like. Each tool could be located in a different facility, and you can still achieve what this diagram is showing here. Okay, so again, as I said, you achieve common repository. This is a hub or bus type integration as opposed to point-to-point integration. The one thing that I didn't mention when I was showing you the diagram is that in Kovair, you just do the data transfer. The business rules do not have to be coded into the adapters. So those can be built as you decide what kind of business rules you need for your particular situation. And then the Kovair platform allows you to create what is called a common interface for managing multiple tools. So now, each person who is working in their own particular tool domain can continue to do that. But from a managing of the development process and the management perspective, you now have a common interface to deal with these multiple tools. And since Kovair is 100% web-based, the access is anywhere globally from anywhere, anytime. And by the way, the other benefit of Kovair is that we have a very, very strong process engine in our tool. And with these integration, we also process enable other tools that may not have a workflow engine, may not have a process capability. And so you're actually enhancing other tools through this integration. Okay. Some of the differentiation, I won't go too much into this. Omnibus is a hub or a bus versus point-to-point integration. Again, as I said, it's a web services standard-based, SOA-based, and APIs are available. There are a lot of advanced features of, conflict detection or mediation, data transformation, synchronization of relations between entities, manage integration rules independent of adapters, which I alluded to in the form of business rules, and support of multiple tools of the same function. And again, as I said, it's not uncommon for various groups to have different tools to do the same functions. And then augmenting the other tools' capabilities. So with that, before we go into the demo, here is a list of adapters that Kovair already has, as shown in the top section, which is about a dozen of them. By the end of this month, we'll have 15 of them. The biggest thing that is coming your way is integration with Eclipse. So those of you who are doing development in the Eclipse environment, you can do that. We already have a Visual Studio integration. So again, those of you who are doing .NET type of development have the Visual Studio integration. So we'll be covering both major areas of development, whether you're Java or .NET. At the end of this month, you can have integration with both types of technologies in Kovair. And then there are various other functional tools that will be coming at the end of this year. So we believe that at the end of this year, Kovair will have the largest availability of different kinds of tools from different vendors that you will have integration adapters for. And that's why we call it an integrated ALM. Our focus is to make sure that best-of-breed tools are integrated on the Kovair platform for anybody that wants to use any of these tools. And with that, let me pass the baton over to Basu to do the demo for you, and we'll save the questions for later. Thank you.
Thank you, Bipin. Good morning, everybody. This is Basu, and we'll start today with some integrations. We'll actually show you 4 different kinds of integrations. We'll start with the Requisite Pro, which you know is a leading requirements management tool from IBM Rational. Actually, it was originally from Rational, and IBM later acquired that. And then we'll show you the integration with SharePoint, which has gained a lot of popularity in the last couple of years, and which is from Microsoft, as you know. Then we'll be also showing you integration with Perforce. Perforce is a leading SCM software configuration management tool from Perforce. And finally, we'll show you the integration with Quality Center, which was originally from Mercury Interactive, and then HP acquired that. So let's start with our Requisite Pro integration, and let me go to. All right, so this is we are looking at the Requisite Pro here, and so the way we'll be working here is we'll create a new requirement in Requisite Pro. So that we'll be doing here using this, and we'll create a new customer requirement here. So here in the tag we have got the customer and functional. So we'll start with the customer requirement, and let's call it a size customer requirement for webinar, let's say. And let's go to the attributes and set it up. Let's say the priority remains medium and the status is proposed, and all of those things remains the same. Okay, so let me just save this one. So when I create this, what really happens is that actually this is running in a different server. Actually, this Requisite Pro is running out of India, and our application is running out of Texas. So let me just close this project, and let me go to the application now. So for application, let me go to a different server, and this is the Kovair application. Let me just log in here, and as I said, this one is running out of Texas. So as Bipin has said, we are very, very globally distributed, and different applications are running, different tools are running at different places all over the world. So when I log in, it comes to my home page, and I'll quickly kind of go through the home page, different areas. So for example, here you see that it shows that I am the logged in user, it shows the login time, etc. In Kovair, at the top level, I have the site, and Kovair architecturally can support multiple sites. It's called a multi-tenant architecture. And under Kovair, for example, there are many workspaces, and these are the workspaces I have access to. Every user can have access to different sets of workspaces. And the workspace is a very flexible container of different items. So in this particular case, this is a Kovair high-level demo workspace where all these different kinds of objects or artifacts are created for them. So projects, requirements, design elements, development packages, test cases, these are for the testing. You have the issues, risk, change list, Perforce files. So these are the proxy entities. If you remember, Bipin mentioned about those proxy entities for integration. So change list, Perforce files are the proxy entities for Perforce. Then change set, subversion files are the proxy entities for subversion. And then you have the SharePoint docs, which is a proxy entity for the SharePoint, etc. So these are all these different objects, and in Kovair actually we call them entities. They are created for this particular workspace, and for every workspace you can create different sets of entities. But for today's demo, actually we are interested in only one entity. In this particular case is the requirements. So let's go to the requirements, and let's look at the requirements list here. So if you look at the very top one here, size customer requirement for webinar, this is the one I just added from Requisite Pro, right? So let's go inside that particular requirement. So here is the requirement, and let me just go into the edit mode button, because what I want to do, I want to edit this one. First of all, I want to change the requirement status to approved. I'm just approving this requirement, and also let me add something to the title. For example, I say that change in Kovair, okay? And also let me change, for example, the priority. Remember it was medium, so let me make it high. So I just changed a few of the attributes here, and let me save that. So once I save it, now I can actually go back to my list here, and let's look at that, the same item here. So here is the same item, which is actually now changed. If you look at the title here, the title is also changed. So what happens is that now Omnibus, based on the changes made in Kovair, is changing it in Requisite Pro. So let's go back to the Requisite Pro and let's see how it changes in Requisite Pro. So let's go back to Requisite Pro. So let me open that project once again. So I'm just logging into that particular project. It has not come back yet. Normally what happens that when it is actually the integration is done, sometimes it takes a little time to come back and change it. So let me just refresh it once again. So it takes a few minutes to come back. In the meantime, let me do this. Let me actually create another requirement, actually a functional requirement here, and we can work with them together. So let me create another requirement, but this time we'll create a functional requirement. So we'll call it Sky functional requirement for webinar, right? And let's go to the traceability and see if we can add that. As a matter of fact, let's wait for a second and let's refresh it once again, see. And maybe what we want to do. Okay, now it has come back. As you can see, then now the title shows that it's changed in Kovair, right? And if I go back to the attributes, now the priority is high, the status is approved. Remember, these are the things I changed in Kovair. So all of these things have now replicated back in Requisite Pro. Now what I'd like to do is create a traceability link between this customer requirement and to the functional requirement, the one I just added. So I'm creating a link between this customer requirement and the functional requirement, right? So let me make it okay here. And if I now go back to the functional requirement, right, I should be able to see the traceability, but in this case, of course, it is shown in from the customer requirement. All right? So I'm done in Requisite Pro. So I can just close this project and let's go back. So let's go back to Kovair. All right? So I'm going back to Kovair. So this is back to Kovair. And let me just refresh this list here. Okay, now if you look at this particular, the very top one, this is a functional requirement I just added in Requisite Pro, remember? Right? So if I go to that particular functional requirement now, and this is the same functional requirement, shows the requirement type is functional, the priority is medium, etc. So one of the sections here is actually the linked requirements. So let me go to the linked requirements here. You see, that link requirements actually shows the linking to the customer requirement. But if you remember, I actually made that link in Requisite Pro. So really, what Omnibus did is not only it replicated back and forth the requirements created in RecPro to Kovair, I made the changes in requirement in Kovair, which again replicated back to Requisite Pro, which is basically doing a synchronization. Not only that, it also replicated the relationship between two requirements, one customer requirement and one functional requirement, which is done in RecPro. That relationship is also replicated back in Kovair. And that is the crux of the Omnibus integration technology, is that it not only replicates the data, but it also replicates the multiple relationship among all different kinds of data. Okay? So that is, as far as the Requisite Pro integration demonstration is concerned, that kind of completes it. We'll now go to the SharePoint integration. So this is a SharePoint. Actually, this is again running on a different server altogether in a different place. So as Bipin said, that all these tools can be anywhere in the world, and we can still integrate them using Omnibus. So this is the SharePoint we are looking at. And one of the lists here we have created is called the requirements. So let's go to the requirements here. Now here you see that the customer requirement which has been changed in Kovair is now shows here in SharePoint. Now here is another very important point that I want you to note. You see that here we have only the customer requirement, not the functional requirement. Why? Because we have actually a business rule that only those requirements which are approved, they will be replicated to SharePoint and all the other tools down the line. Though they are created in RecPro being the requirements management tool, of course it created all those requirements, but we actually approved it in Kovair, and only those requirements which are approved will be replicated to the other tools. For example, in SharePoint. That's why SharePoint is showing only the customer requirement. Okay? So what we'll do next is actually we will upload our document. So let me upload a document here. So let's look at my desktop and let's see. And let me upload a very small document so that let's say this one. So I'm just uploading Excel spreadsheet called the requirements list import sample. Right, I just uploaded this one. So what I'd like to do is, I would like to, one of the things required here is that to give a title for this document. So I'm just putting the same name as the title here. And so what I really did, I uploaded this document, requirements list import sample. Okay, now what I'd like to do is go to the requirements, the same requirement here, and go to the edit mode of that requirement. And here you see the link shared document. So let me just link it to the document I have just uploaded. So I'm just linking the requirement which has been replicated from Kovair, which was actually created originally in RecPro and replicated from Kovair to SharePoint. I just created a link between this requirement and the document which I uploaded, right? So you can see it here, okay? So as far as SharePoint is concerned, I'm done with respect to whatever was to be done in SharePoint. So now I can go back to Kovair. So let's go back to Kovair. And in Kovair, remember that I've shown you a number of different objects here. And one of the objects was, so let me just scroll it here. One of the objects was SharePoint document. So let's go to the SharePoint document and let's look at that SharePoint document here. So you see the document, the one I just uploaded in SharePoint, it is now shown in Kovair as well. So there is actually an entity called the SharePoint document, which is the proxy entity for the documents in SharePoint. And by adding a document in SharePoint, automatically replicates that in Kovair as well. So let me go to the detail of that particular document, and here is the document. And if I want to see, for example, the file content, I can see it from here, for example. So I'm just downloading the file. So here is the file, the content of the file. So if I want to see the content of the file, by the way, one very interesting point here is that you see the actual content of the file. This file is actually, the content is fetched from SharePoint on demand. These file contents are not being kept in Kovair because there can be thousands of files, gigabytes and terabytes of data. We don't want to load that in Kovair. We are getting the content on demand as and when necessary. So that is what is called the federated link. So you have just seen the example of a federation where the actual information of the file content is actually brought from SharePoint on demand. Okay, now here also it shows it is linked to that requirement, the same requirement. And this month, if you remember, we actually made that linking in SharePoint. So just like what we have seen in Requisite Pro, similarly, the linking between the requirement and document are also replicated from SharePoint to Kovair, and that is being shown here. And the same thing is true if I look at from the requirements point of view. So if I go to the requirements, and from the requirement, the same requirements, our customer requirement, right? If we go there, and here is a section which shows that linked SharePoint documents. And if we go there, we'll see the same SharePoint document which is linked to this particular requirement. So that basically completes our demonstration of the integration with SharePoint. So what we have done in SharePoint, we uploaded a new document, and we saw that the requirement which was originally created by the Rec Pro and replicated by Kovair is in the SharePoint. There is a list called requirements in SharePoint. It is already there. And we created a link between the requirement and the uploaded document in SharePoint. When we came back to Kovair, we saw that the same document is now replicated in Kovair as an object called the SharePoint document. Not only that, when we tried to see the content, it went to SharePoint, fetched the actual content of the document, and shown us the actual content. Not only that, it also given us the link between the requirements and that SharePoint document. So all the things we did in SharePoint is now replicated back in Kovair, and all these informations are available from Kovair. Okay, now the next thing we'd like to do is the Perforce integration. So let's look at, let's go and open our Perforce here. So Perforce is a source code management system. So what we will do, first of all, those of you who are not familiar with Perforce, Perforce has certain objects which are a little different from the other source code management systems. So if you have not used Perforce or a similar one, you may find it a little bit different from typical kind of source